Hello, and welcome to another episode of Costume Confidential. I'm Julie Oakes, and I'm the costumer at the Pickering Museum Village. And today, I thought I'd show you some of our really fancy dresses. Now, these are bustle dresses from about the 1870 period, and you don't see these every time you come to the village because these only come out in good weather and when we're having an event that lends itself to what people walking around in fancy clothing. This is not the kind of thing you would have seen in the backwoods of Pickering Township. But we got very lucky in the acquisition of these dresses. What happened was we saw them actually at an antique store in Port Hope, and there was a whole collection of dresses that had come from a TV show called Little Men. At the end of a TV show, they often send all of the costuming to auction, and someone buys them. Well, it turned out that this antique store owner bought it and then needed to get rid of it because they didn't have the room to store them. So the curator at the time, Dave Marlowe, gave us the okay, and we got a really great quantity of these beautiful dresses. Some of them came with hats, they came with little accessories. We also got a whole collection of nightgowns and all kinds of things from the show, and all at a very good price. So we were extremely lucky because to make these would cost a great deal of money in both time and in fabric. So just a little look at some of these dresses just so you can see some of the beautiful detail. This blue and turquoise one here, as you can see, the bustle lifts it out at the back, and it's beautifully done in a silk. And if we turn it around so you can see the front of it. Now, this particular dummy is a little bit fluffy for this outfit, so it doesn't exactly button, and I don't want to strain the fabric, but at least you get the idea. So as you can see, the trim on it is absolutely fantastic, and this type of trim was very typical in the 1870s. Because by the 1870s, everyone had a sewing machine. They were pretty well introduced and very widespread by mid-century. You would think that it would make life easier for everyone because they had a sewing machine. In fact, what happened was the fashions actually became more and more elaborate because they could do this with a sewing machine. So what you see in 1870s dresses is a great deal of trim. You see ruching, you see ruffles, you see all kinds of things happening because they had the machine to help them. So this is just an example here of some of the types of trim that you would have. The self-covered buttons, of course, is quite lovely, and the two colors of the silk work just perfectly together. Now this one here is a beautiful, beautiful dark burgundy with this almost sort of a dark violet. An unusual color combination, but quite lovely. This is the ruching I was speaking of earlier. The ruching at the collar is quite beautiful. And of course at the hem, you have more of this incredible pleating, which again is very time consuming to do. Now this one is there, look at that. This is very typical of the 70s where you have a little bodice over the top and this almost peplum effect at the back. And this really emphasizes the curve of the bustle. And then what happens then is the skirt is bustled up with little ties or tapes underneath to make it stick, to make the fabric pull up like this. And very often, again, there was a certain amount of trimming at the bottom like that, the ruching and so forth. So I'm going to turn it that way so you can get the full effect of that lovely bustle. And now, some of the other dresses that we had, as I said, came with accessories. Look at this spectacular hat. Isn't that amazing? Look at the ostrich feathers on that. Now that hat was meant to be jauntily placed on the forehead, just coming down on the top of piled up hair, and of course held in place with a hat pin. So that one is really quite lovely. And it was made to go with this particular dress here. Now, let me show you the different parts of this dress. First of all, the skirt, which is incredibly heavy, is blue and yellow. And look at the bows on the back. The bows are just fantastic. And to go over that, we have the bodice and the overskirt. The overskirt is silk, a moire actually. And what happens with that one? There, you can have a good look. You see about how the ties on the inside, they keep the bustled effect up. So that then goes around the waist like that, and then this comes down the front of the skirt so that you can see all this incredible yellow ruching on the front here, really bright on the turquoise. And then over top of that goes the bodice. And the bodice is here. And the bodice, again, uses both fabrics, and look at the detail on that sleeve. Pleating and lace and bows and ruching. Typical 1870s, absolutely over the top, which is quite spectacular. Now this dress underneath, what we call the Salmon and Oyster, is seen on some occasions. We have one particular actress in our Backwoods group, Samantha, that likes to wear this one, and she looks absolutely lovely in it. This one has a beautiful overskirt. The underskirt is the same fabric, and on the back of it, flip this over so you can see it. There we go. On the back, you have the two streamers that hang down the back, and give a lovely effect with the oyster color. The bodice. There we go. There we go. The bodice is another little jacket, done up with hooks and eyes, but with the self-covered buttons in the front too. That's a pretty typical thing too, to have hooks and eyes underneath and have the self-covered buttons on the top. It saves a lot of wear and tear on these buttons, because if you have to handle these a lot, they would get sort of dirty from the oil from your fingers, and they're actually quite awkward to do up. So very often you will see hooks and eyes underneath an effect like that. And again, the pleating and the ruching of that. This particular dress has an interesting story because it had the silk underneath the sleeve on one side had completely shattered, probably from sweat from the actress, we don't doubt. And so we had one of our seamstresses that's in the Nimble Thimbles group was able to do an absolutely invisible mending. And honestly, I cannot even tell you which sleeve it was that she mended, because they are beautifully done, and she's an amazing seamstress, so that was quite fun. What we do when someone wears these dresses, because they're quite valuable, and because they are a little bit more difficult because of the fact that they're silk, so not so easy to wash, we tend to we sew in dress shields, so the sweat will be soaked up by the dress shields. But the other thing that you can do, if someone is wearing an outfit, like say for example on the inside of the bodice, say there was a lot of sweat on the back of the bodice, which could happen. The old costumer's trick is you take a solution of half vodka and half water, and you spray it on, and what happens is the alcohol in the vodka completely destroys any bacteria. It's colorless, it doesn't affect the fabric at all, but it's an easy way to make sure that the bacteria doesn't make the fabric shatter or rot. So that's a little look at some of our fantastic, beautiful clothing, and if you come and volunteer here, you might just get to wear this hat. Thanks very much, and join us again for another episode of Costumer Confidential.